Okay. Can you hear me live stream now, folks? Can you hear me? Testing, testing. One, two, three. Is my voice carrying over the airwaves? Hello? Yeah. Well, I'm going to keep going because we have a lot to go through. Um, so we have Chevra Kadisha, which is established in 1817. We have the allocation of Jewish land for a cemetery in 1832. And we have the first wedding, the first Jewish wedding in Australia in 1830 between Moses Joseph and Rosetta Nathan. N- uh, no, no, no. Yes. It was established as, yes. Oh, are they free to roam or are they in jail? No, they are just basically deported there. They can live there freely, but they have been like thrown out of the country as convicts. And I guess the policy in England at that time was we're just going to get rid of the bad people and we're just going to send them somewhere else. And what happens there, but we're rid of them here. Okay. During the interwar period, can anyone tell me approximately when the interwar period? We're talking about the end of World War One and the beginning of World War Two. It's called the interwar period. Very good. 1918, 1919 to 1939. Perfect. All right. During the interwar period, um, which, by the way, in our tradition is what we call the golden age of Chazanut, the golden age of cantors. So all the amazing voices that we have had in our tradition, Rosenblatt, Hirschman, all these insanely talented cantors, um, they came from this period. That's when Chazanut, the art of the cantor, was at its height. Okay. Um, so during the inter interwar period, there was much immigration to Australia, but it was limited. It was limited because of something that was called the White Australia policy, the White Australia policy. And that started in 1901, and it limited immigration from non-European. Yes? Very good. All right. So it limited immigration from non-Europeans, of non-European ethnic origin. And so it concentrated mostly on Asia, and uh, it was ultimately dismantled after World War II. Now, we did the same thing here in the United States. We had an very, very similar immigration policy. Does anyone know how that came into being or what it was called? Or so in 1924, Congress passed legislation, the Johnson-Reed Immigration Restriction Act. And what the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act did was to restrict immigration primarily from Southeast Asia, but what it ended up including was Eastern Europe. So, until 1924, Jews could leave Eastern Europe and come to the United States. And we know there was a huge influx, right? That was 1900 to 1924. I mean, many of our ancestors came over on ships to Ellis Island and got into the United States. In 1924, that was cut off by a lot. Why did we do that, and why did Australia do that? Not a bad answer at all. I wouldn't exactly use that word, but the effect. Oh, I'm sorry. The the white supremacy. That was the reason given, and that's not far off at all. The idea was that the governments wanted to promote a more homogenous society. They didn't want people from the outside coming in. So, yes, white supremacy. Yes, and and Jews were part of that situation, both for Australia and for America, and after that for England, who issued the White Paper in 1939. So remember that on the eve of the Second World War, after Kristallnacht especially, Jews Jews began to really understand the gravity of their situation. We're going to talk a little more about that in a second because it's going to come up. But the idea that until Kristallnacht, German Jews especially felt, okay, well, we're Germans who happen to be Jewish. You know, this is going to blow over. Everything's going to be fine. Bum, bum, bum. Well, it wasn't, and we all know it wasn't. But by the time it happens, England had closed off immigration. The United States had closed off immigration. We had, certainly in Australia, was closed off. There was like no place for Jews to go. No one would have them. So these acts promoting a homogeneous society had disastrous effects upon the Jews of Eastern Europe. Say again? The ship to St. Louis. Yes, what do you want to tell me about that? That's correct. So you had a shipload of Jews fleeing Europe, and the ship was called the St. Louis, and it tried to dock everywhere, basically, for the Jews to disembark, and wherever they landed, they were refused the ability to dock. So ultimately, those Jews were sent back to Germany, and as soon as they got off the ship, they were taken off. They were taken away. Oh, very good. Very good. Very good. Yes. Yes. So Gary says there were some, and certainly there were some very smart German Jews who read the situation clearly and left Germany earlier to get out before Kristallnacht. Yes. Unfortunately, many of them went to other places in Western Europe and were caught up in the Nazi regime. Yes. How wonderful for them, really. Unbelievable. Yes. Yes. S- we're gonna get to Canada when we get to C in the alphabet. So I'm on. It's a good question, and we will definitely go there. Correct. They hardly had a population, but they wanted to keep their population a certain way. Yes, absolutely. Now, the Johnson Reed Act for us ended up being disbanded in 1952 first, and then completely in 1965. We had it that long. It was unbelievable. But yes. Hmm. They did not want who? Oh, yes. So it was saying that you were there in Australia during the Vietnam War, and they would not accept Vietnamese immigrants. Yes, this is this is absolutely true. And there's a law now that they don't want to accept Afghans, probably Syrians as well. Um, yes, yes, you're right. Right. Look, immigration is such a thorny problem everywhere, and people are desperate. And as the world has become more violent and more oppressed, people become more desperate. Yes. Yeah. Well, when we get to ends, we get to New Zealand. But I promise we will get there. I promise. There's so much to talk about in every country. It's just wonderful. It's a great topic that you picked. So, so let's keep going. So, obviously, since the Middle East is not European ethnic background, Australia denied entry to Mizrahi Jews. If you were a German Jew, it was okay. If you were a Romanian Jew, it was not okay. If you, because the White Australia policy included Eastern Europe, just as the Johnson Reed Immigration Act included Eastern Europe, but not Western Europe. Um, and so the first Mizrahi Jews came into Australia in 1956 during hostilities in the Suez, and they were allowed to finally come in. Um, the Sephardic Jews began immigration into Australia in the late 1800s, but it was very, very small, and uh, um, and it was very short-lived. They had a small community, and we could sort of conjecture to why that happened, right? We think of Sephardic Jews as what? Spain and Portugal, right? Okay. At Turkey, Rhodes, Greece, right? So after, so we we use the term Sephardic, which was the Hebrew name for Spain, Sepharad. And as you know, after the Inquisition, during the Inquisition, in 1492, the Jews are expelled from Spain and then slightly later from Portugal. And so the Jews moved around northern Africa. They moved into what we now call the Middle East. So why was Sephardic immigration so low? Partly because where did most of the Sephardic Jews live at that time? They lived outside of Spain and Portugal in non-European lands. And what did the White Australia policy limit? Immigration from non-European ethnic backgrounds. So they didn't come in large numbers. Um, those Jews who came early settled in the major urban centers, which are Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, and then you have down here in Hobart in Tasmania. But in Sydney, the congregations worshipped in houses until 1844, and then they built the first synagogue in Sydney. And then came Hobart in Tasmania, Launceston, Melbourne, and then Adelaide, which is actually right here. I didn't put that in. And starting in 1850, there was a gold rush in Australia, and that attracted lots of Jews. But the gold happened to be in the more rural areas. In other words, we weren't mining for gold in Sydney, right? We were mining for gold in the middle of the country, just like we had here in the United States. It was in the mountains and, yeah, exactly. Head west, go to the hills. And so they went to the rural areas, but a problem arose because they had a fear of assimilation. In the rural areas, there were no other Jews, and it drove them to the cities. And what we saw at this time in the late 1800s was a rise in intermarriage rates, a drop in synagogue attendance, and a lack of affiliation in general. Sound like it could be right now, right? Yeah. Since the destruction of Herod's temple, the second temple, the largest problem for Jews living outside of the land of Israel, and this continues until right this moment that we are speaking, is how do you maintain an authentic Jewish life outside of the land of Israel? Because depending on where you are, it becomes more difficult or less difficult. If you're at Pico and Robertson, not so hard. You've got kosher you got all your kinds of Jewish community right there. If you're in Boise, Idaho, much more difficult. Okay, and now I'm talking about traditional Judaism. Being able to walk to the synagogue. Well, being able to walk to the synagogue in Boise, Idaho in February is not easy. Okay. Yes. Because both the United States, England, and Australia lumped Eastern Europe into Eastern and Southeastern Europe into Asia. And part of it, too, was, the United States wanted to limit Jews coming in. There was, our government was anti-Semitic. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, FDR did incredible things for our country, but he wasn't like super friendly for the Jews. Correct. 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 However, most of the people who were wanting to immigrate at that I got it. So the question was, but you mentioned earlier that it was against Eastern European people, not necessarily Eastern European Jews. So it could have been a Lithuanian Catholic who would be denied entry. That's true. But by and large, the largest percentage of immigrants from Eastern Europe at that time were Jews. And the United States government knew that. Congress knew that. And so the effect of the Johnson-Reed Immigration Restriction Act was to cut off Jewish immigration from Eastern Europe. Yes, it limited Asian immigration as well. And as you think, 1924, World War II had not started yet, but it was in effect during World War II such that Japanese could not come here because the United States obviously was very concerned about that. All right. The first theater was built by a Jewish composer, Isaac Nathan, and he is called the father of Australian music. How interesting, huh? By 1939, and the war breaking out, there was an influx of Jewish immigrants. Australia allowed 7,000 Jews to come over. Now, obviously, that's like this much of how many needed to get out and needed to go somewhere. So the effect of the White Australia policy was to deny thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews who needed to get out of Germany the ability to go somewhere. But they did take 7,000. And we took a small percentage as well. And England took a small. But it was so limited that so many who needed to come here couldn't get here. These 7,000 Jews who came in, they were split between Sydney, Australia, and Melbourne. Sydney and Melbourne. All right. What ended up happening is that Sydney became a center for the much more assimilated and secular Jews. Melbourne became a center for the Orthodox Jews. That's why I asked you the question earlier. Does that remind anyone of anything that happened here in the United States? The first wave of immigration in the late 1800s was from where? Anybody know? Germany. Russia's coming up second, but Germany first. And those who came over from Germany were what kinds of Jews? Assimilated secular Jews who were wealthy, right? Educated, wealthy, assimilated secular Jews. All right. The next large waves came from Russia and Eastern Europe, right? Following the assassination of Tsar Nicholas Alexander following the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881. Starts the first pogroms and the waves of immigration to the United States. And so what happened was you had already here in New York, you had a group of wealthy, educated, successful, secular German Jews, a whole community. And they are watching waves and waves and waves of uneducated, very poor Eastern European Jews and come here, and they were mortified. They were embarrassed. They were like, oh my God, these people are like, they're throwing a chicken around their head? What? I mean, this is crazy. And it led to great tension in New York at the time between the German Jewish population and the Eastern European population. Well, you have centers now. The Orthodox moved to Melbourne, and the secular Jews went more to Sydney. During the war and right after the war, the Sephardic community then began to reinvigorate. By this time, Sephardic Jews had spread to lots of other places as well. There are today 81 synagogues and 18 day schools in Australia. And I'm sure it will surprise you, because it surprised me to know that Australia has the highest rate in the world of Jews who are enrolled in Jewish day schools, except for Israel. And Australia has by comparison to other countries around the world, a very low rate of intermarriage. A low rate of intermarriage. More secular in Sydney. Yeah. And Melbourne is still more of a religious center. Melbourne and Sydney is more secular, more assimilated. You know, I think we all understand here, because we just read about this last week with Jacob and Esau in our Parsha. Esau gets a terrible rap. Our story doesn't say he's a bad guy at all. It just says, in fact, we feel sorry for him. He gets tricked. He gets duped. He's just this big guy presumably big guy, who can hunt, and he's like a starker, and that's our sort of thing about him. And Jacob is this kind of milder kind of guy, and Rebecca loves him. Isaac loves Esau. And it doesn't, our story is missing so much information. In my other class, I taught Midrash on this yesterday, that the idea that, poor Esau then, in terms of rabbinic tradition, the rabbis have to make him awful. They have to make him despicable. And in the Midrash, the rabbis just make him the most awful person on the planet. And where was I going with this? Assimilation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And what we find out, wow. And what we find out about Esau is that he goes and marries 2 Hittite women, right? And then he takes a 3rd wife. And this idea of taking the Hittite women as wives, Hittites who are pagans, very clearly, and the assumption is that they are going to sort of persuade their husband, Esau, to become pagan as well and to worship other gods and be an idolater. Well, of course, the rabbis say absolutely he was an idolater. That's why he's so hated by God. He's so hated by God. Where? Where in the story is that? Oh, it's in the story. And the rabbis do a very interesting job. But this idea of intermarriage, as you all know, becomes such a flashpoint for our people. Because I think all of us who have reached a certain age understand that, love is very precious in the world. It's very precious. And so many people never find it ever. And so, on the one hand, we all want to say, if you find love, real love, grab it. Grab it and don't let it go. Because it's really hard to find. Grab it. If that person happens to be Jewish, great. That's fantastic. That's the best case scenario. What if that person doesn't happen to be Jewish? What do? You say, I'd rather not have the love. I'm sure that most, all of us are dealing with this with our children and grandchildren at some point. You hope not. You hope not, but it's much more the rule rather than the exception. Our children and grandchildren are much easier about things. And our hope for our children, right, and grandchildren is that they're happy and they find love. That's our greatest hope for them. And if it happens to be with a non-Jew, okay, that becomes a little problematic. There are ways around it. We can, if let's say the Jewish son marries a non-Jewish wife, and the non-Jewish wife is not particularly into religion, and she says, okay, I have no problem, we're going to raise the children Jewish. Okay, that's a great scenario, right? Children get converted, and they're raised as Jews, and that's all they know, and they're Jewish. And then our line continues. Anyway, we've all thought about this a million times, so I'll just, yes. Goodness, how awful. That you had, it was your niece, or who was it? Classmate, who classmate who was your rabbi's daughter, who fell in love with a non-Jewish man, and the rabbi would not allow them to get married. My great aunt, whom I was very close with my whole life, was in love with a non-Jewish man. And of course, at that time, if you married someone outside the faith, the family observed Shiva for you. They cut you out. And she knew that, and she never met another person, and she never got married her entire life. And I've always thought, how tragic, how unbelievably tragic that she didn't have that experience of love in her life. Terrible. Correct. Correct. Actually, very good. So the question is, if the intermarriage rate is low, does that mean the Jewish population in Australia is stable and it's not going down? That is correct. In fact, the Jewish population, by estimates in Australia, is slowly gaining. It slowly increases. Correct. They are staying there. Yes, there have been a number of different prominent Jewish politicians over the years. Let me finish up with this because we're almost out of time. In 2014, we have the first agreement between Israel and Australia for economic and cultural cooperation. Australia and the U.S., I didn't know this, Australia and the U.S. were the only two countries after the 1967 war to vote against Palestinian statehood in the UN Security Council. And to let you know how very precarious that was, there were 10 members of the Security Council. They needed 9 votes in order to establish a Palestinian state. They got 8. And Australia and the United States were the only two countries who voted against it. And had one of us, Australia or us, said yes, we would have had a Palestinian state. Whether or not that's a good thing, that's a whole hornet's nest. So we're not going there. But I will just tell you, Australia joined us in voting against that. Netanyahu is the first prime minister to visit Australia ever, and he did that in 2017. In terms of sort of like sights to see, the Melbourne community was established in 1841, and they have a number of beautiful synagogues there. But the big synagogue, it's called the Great Synagogue in Sydney. You saw it? Was it tremendous? Oh, you saw it. How many of you have seen the Great Synagogue? Tell me about it, because it sounds tremendous. Oh, my goodness. Oh, nice. Men, but wonderful. Maybe Rosh Chodesh Shabbos no? Okay. I see. Very nice. Okay, one more question, then I have one more comment because I got to finish. Yeah. And it was a beautiful synagogue, huh? Unbelievable. Um, so that was established in 1878, and then finally, Hobart here is the first synagogue. It's the oldest synagogue currently in Australia, the oldest one. And so it's located in Tasmania. So if the first Jews came from Botany Bay, they moved down into Tasmania, which is much more wild, right? Yeah, than rest of Australia. Yes. Yep. Okay, everyone. Oh, yes. Outback rabbis. No, I haven't. How interesting. A wandering Jew in search of other Jews. Yes, wonderful. All right, everyone. The question was, have you seen a documentary called Outback Rabbi about Chabad outreach in Australia, trying to um, find Jews inland from more rural areas? All right, everyone. Have a beautiful week.
in there. So, and the sound guy is supposed to, because there's a terrible noise back there. Oh my God. Rosa couldn't hear. So, but anyway, so we'll do the best we can. So we can't give a mic to Peter. So please repeat. Frankly, I can't hear sitting back there, especially with noise. So even for me, I appreciate that. And I know you talked to Joette about our thing for Melinda.
Yeah, yeah, we're good. Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, especially to those of you who are streaming. I humbly apologize for the problems today. There is an issue. Somebody just said I didn't do it, and I truly did not do it. And I know the noise is bad here in the room, too. The man from streaming, the sound man, is supposed to come. It's probably not going to happen during this hour. So I apologize, and I appreciate you being out there, and I certainly appreciate everyone here, too.
Oh wait, I don't have it. Sorry, I need someone to forfeit a copy because I gave them. You'll share. Thank you. Okay. So good morning, everybody, and what I want to do. Wow. Is it driving everyone crazy? Eventually. Jim, I wish I had mastered that, and any insights, because they annoy me frequently and and intensely. Um, um, okay, so what I'd like to do is another fun subject that I'd like to discuss this morning is lies, motivated by the Fleetwood Mac song. Tell me lies, tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies. So the question that we have is it okay to lie? Can we tell lies? And when are circumstances allowing us? And what I'd like to do is to explore two Talmudic passages. One that I pulled out that I had actually never learned before. And so I needed the cheating text here to kind of help me out here a little bit. And I gave that to you with some interesting questions. But then I want to go with the more standard text about lies. And I'm going to start with that. And that's the text that is, what happens, and I don't mean to be mean here, what do you tell an ugly bride? All right, so we're gonna run this in a democratic fashion. You get invited to the wedding, and you're there. There's baby lamb chops, and you're eating. Baby lamb chops, that's expensive, right? You're drinking a little bit. You're making l'chaims. You're making brachas. Everything is going really well. And you take a look at the bride. Oy vey. All right. So the question is, what do you tell the oy vey bride? We should, by the way, make an extension to this and we should read this in a more fair way. But what do you tell the oy vey groom? Okay, right? Like, okay, so let's raise your hand. What do you think you should say? You're there. You're in front of them. What do you say? Go ahead. Okay. So you don't ignore the subject. Why are you ignoring the subject? She knows. You don't have to remind her, and she'll know that you're. So don't lie. Okay. So wait. So that's something that's slightly different. Are we a little domestic dispute here? Okay. Okay. So do you look to compliment something that is true? I guess there's different paths, and maybe if you think of it different. Hold on, let me give you your options. Path number one, you're beautiful. You look beautiful. Just like lie. Path number two, thank you for having me here today. It's a beautiful affair. I love the baby lamb chops. Path number three is, you are so, your nails look good, or your personality is good, or you have a beautiful dress, or you dance that dance so well. So in other words, you say something complimentary that is true, but not that. So again, path number one, behind door number one, ignore the subject. Path number two, just lie. Path number three is say something true about sort of something else that's kind of related. Okay. All right. Option number one. Raise your hand if you're going for option number one. Option number one is ignore. Ignore the subject. Thanks for having me here. No one's going to do that. Option number two. You'll be able to comment in just a second. You're all raising your hands, which is good. Option number two. Lies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 liars. Okay, we have 9 liars. And then option number 3, something like related, like you have nice nails, you're wearing a nice dress, you've got a great personality. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so in a very 12. Oh, question. Option number 4. Okay, so option number 4 I think is the same thing as option number 3. It's sort of like, you know, it's a compliment about her, but not about, how she's looking. Yeah. Okay. Gary Pechersky says, no, Rabbi. You can see I'm all caffeinated up today. Rabbi, that's incorrect. Yes. Okay, so then option number 5 is that you're not lying. Okay. Gary, there are a few people, and I mean this authentically, there are a few people as nice as you in the world. I mean that I'm not like just like I mean that truly. Like you are a glass, not half full guy, you're a glass 9/10 of the way full. And that is a beautiful way to view life. And I wish I was as optimistic as you are. And I don't think our tradition is either. So most people, the rabbis, are saying most of us, that it's not entirely fair because I do I've done a lot of weddings, and there's something beautiful about a bride. Yeah, there really is something beautiful about the bride. But then when you're in that situation, you're not in a tough place because you actually mean it. So So it rolls off your tongue. So it's not a conundrum. When you mean it when it rolls off your tongue truthfully, then you're not in an ethical conundrum. I'm posing the ethical conundrum, meaning you're not feeling it. You look at her or him and you're like, ugly. And you don't see it. What do you do then? So I'm going to push you to say, if you can't see the beauty, do you ignore it? Do you lie about it? Or do you make you have a beautiful, I've never seen you so happy, your nails look great, the dress, define the compliment. Okay. Right. So what's that? Is that a backhanded compliment? No, I think a backhanded compliment is it's an utz without it being like an utz, right? It's a disguised utz. Okay. All right. So 1, 2, 3. Go ahead. Right. Okay, a backhanded compliment is that woman makes you look thin. Right? You say to the groom, she makes you look thin. That's a backhanded compliment. You probably want to stay away from that. Right? You really don't want to. Gary would never say. Gary's like this. Gary, this class is not for you because you don't have to worry about it. But what I love about rabbinic literature is when ideal crashes with reality. Like the Bible sees things like, and in one passage in the Bible it says stay away from truth, stay away from lies. That's in Exodus. But then you're sitting there, and you're not as nice of a person as Gary. And you're like, what do I say? And you feel the conundrum. You don't want to insult anyone. You're not as nice of a person that you feel like you're beautiful, because then there's no conundrum. But when you're in that place, I'm dealing with this with my 14-year-old son. He's like a tell it like he sees it kind of kid. He's a tell it like he sees it kind of kid. And I'm trying to teach him the beauty of the gray. And that is a really tough. He sees it in literature, and he sees it in movies, but in life it's yes or no, black or white, right or wrong. And the rabbis live in the gray. And put yourself in this situation. You're standing before the bride, and it's inauthentic. You're not a bad person. It's inauthentic to say you're not feeling that she is beautiful. Do you say it? And so what do you do when you have that conundrum? Okay. So now, some other comments, and then we're going to look at, by the way, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagree on this matter. And then we'll do another complicated story on lies. Okay, go ahead, Ray. Okay, so Ray says there's a fine tuning. Ray is a diplomat. Ray says the way you say is you look lovely. So that is kind of number 3. It's like a way of complimenting the person without addressing the elephant in the room. Okay. Go ahead, Joette. Either do I. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, we'll get there. Right, but that's still number 3. If you said to the groom, if you go up to the groom, they're standing together and be like, I see your smile and it's clear she is the most beautiful person in your eyes, it's still number 3. Right. So the question is if you're saying something, okay, we're going to look in just a minute on what Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai say. Go ahead, James. You look so happy. Okay, great. All right, good. Right. So number 3, the number 3 option, I think it's number 3. If you want it to be number 4, that's fine too. But I think what you're saying is a different way of doing it. Instead of ignoring it and instead of lying about it, you say something that is true. You could stand behind it. You look lovely. You have never looked happier. You make a great couple. Yeah, why not? Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. So excellent. So these are all. So the question really is, in the face of what do decent people do in the face of an ethical conundrum when 2 values compete? You have a value of being misameach chatan v'kala. It's a mitzvah, which means you have an obligation. The only reason you're at the wedding is not so you to enjoy the baby lamb chops. You're at the wedding that you should bring joy to the bride and groom. That's the mitzvah. Right. Like you enliven them, misameach, like you make them have simcha. You're there for them. They're not there. You're there to, it's the same thing at a funeral. You're there to bring comfort to the mourners. You're of service. So the question is, how do you be of service in a situation where it could make you go against another value, in this case, which is speaking truthfully? So let's look at how the rabbis dealt with this. Okay. I have to go to the eye doctor because I can't. I got to go like this. Yeah. How are you doing? Okay? Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So this text you don't have. But I'll embellish it for you. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ketzad mirakdin lifnei hakala. How does one dance before the bride? Which is a fancy way of saying, like, what do you do before a bride? And they mean like, what do you do at the wedding? Beit Shammai Omrim, the house of Shammai says, Kala kamot shehi. You tell the bride like she is. Now you got to be careful. So like, tell it like it is. You think she's beautiful? You're beautiful. You think Kalat kamot shehi. That's what Beit Shammai says. But I want to actually offer that the way they're reading this, the commentaries, is door number 3. They're not actually saying be offensive. They're saying find the smile, find the personality, the dress, the glasses, the makeup. Find something positive. He's not saying be a jerk, but he is saying don't lie. That's what the house of Shammai is saying. Kala kamot shahid. Dig deep, figure it out, don't lie, but come up with something positive. Okay? Uveit Hillel omrim, kala na'a v'chasuda. That a bride, you say to her, how fair and attractive you are. Door number 2. Shammai is opting for door number 3. Find something, the smile, the personality, the chemistry, the dancing, the nail polish, anything except like anything true. Hillel says, no. Tell her you are beautiful. Amru lehen Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai says, what? Hillel, haven't you learned a little Torah? Because in the Torah, no, I messed up. Hari shehaita chigeret or suma omrim la kala na'a v'chasuda. So Shammai says to Hillel, in a case where the bride is lame or blind, do you also say to her, you are fair and attractive? In other words, what he's saying is, and this is not, he's like, if it's so clearly not true, are you still going to say it? That's what Shammai is asking. If you see that what is being, like, it's clearly not true, do you go ahead and say it? Then he doesn't stop there. He says, because I'm going to remind you, Beit Hillel, v'haTorah amra midvar sheker tirchak, that one should distance themselves from lies. In other words, Shammai pulls out what in rabbinic literature is an ultimate prize. It's like an ace. The ace, or a joker gone wild, which is a pasuk in the Torah. A seemingly indisputable pasuk in the Torah. Beit Shammai says, by the way, Hillel, you're going to tell her something that is clearly not true when the Torah says, keep away from falsehoods? In other words, Beit Hillel, you're not disagreeing with me. You're disagreeing with the Torah. And then, Amru lahem Beit Hillel leVeit Shammai, Lidivrechem misha lekach mikach ra min hashuk, yishapchenu be'einav or yignenu be'einav. Beit Hillel says to Beit Shammai, according to your statement, if someone acquires something like a bad thing in the shuk, if they get taken advantage of, do you condemn it or praise it in front of them? In other words, it's kind of like the same thing. In other words, if someone says to you, hey, I bought a new car and I paid $10,000 over sticker price. Well, today you would. But like, the first rule of thumb that my dad taught me is you never pay MSRP on a car, right? Like, that's not true anymore. Like today's, but let's say it's clear that you got taken advantage of. What do you say to someone? They bought a house, and news flash, like you got taken advantage of. It was a bad deal, but it's too late. Do you say that to the person? And so he says, Havi Omer Yishabchenu Be'einav. No, it's clear that you praise it in front of him. Oh, that's a great car. Or, no, what a great purchase you made. So Hillel doesn't back down. Hillel says, no, you lie. Mikan Amru Chachamin, which is so interesting. Let me tell you what's so interesting about this rabbinic. I see you, Joed. I'll open it up in a second. Is usually in rabbinic literature, when one rabbi pulls out, like the Bible is considered more authoritative than an opinion of a rabbi, right? And earlier rabbis are considered more authoritative than later rabbis of certain periods. So if you are having a dispute, if you can come up with something like a dispute between two contemporary sources is a dispute that stands. Rabbi of one generation to the rabbi of the same generation, the rabbi stands. But if you, in this dispute, and a rabbi can come up with something more authoritative, either from an earlier rabbi or the grand prize from the Bible, you're going to trump the person that you're having an argument with. And that's exactly what Hillel does here. Hillel that's what Shammai does. Shammai says, Hillel, I have a verse. The verse says, don't lie. It's in the book of Exodus. And guess what Hillel does? Beit Hillel. He ignores that. He doesn't retort with another verse that proves his point. He just says, oh, if someone got a bad deal in the market, are you going to criticize their purchase or are you going to praise it? And Hillel says, praise it. So Hillel ignores the rules of the game. The rules of the game is Shammai just upped the stakes. Shammai just brought in a verse from the Torah that says, don't lie. And Hillel, instead of countering with a verse from the Torah, ignores it and says, what, are you going to tell someone who made a bad purchase in the market that they made a bad purchase? No, you're going to say it was a good deal. And then the text goes on, Mikan amru chachamim leolam tehei da'ato shel adam me'orveret im habriot. For eternity, a person's disposition should always be empathetic with mankind. In other words, Shammai and Hillel get into an argument. By really the rules of Talmud, Shammai wins. But the rabbis ignore it and insist on Hillel's opinion. Even though Shammai played the better hand, he had the Torah. What I want to say here, what's making this so interesting is the rabbis overrule the Torah. The rabbis turn a blind eye. Like Shammai shut the argument down. He says, the Torah says, and then Hillel brings in reasoning. And then subsequent sages say, no, we follow Hillel. Wait a second, we shouldn't follow Hillel. Hillel didn't counter with another Torah verse. It should be Shammai who wins this argument, but they ignored Beit Shammai and say empathy. I love this teaching for so many reasons. I still say you do it. I love this teaching for so many reasons. First is, I love that it breaks the rules. And maybe this is when Gary will like it. I like that it breaks the rules for like a kind reason. Right? That Shammai feels cruel. It's the right thing, but it feels all wrong. Now, he's actually maybe not, because he's still opting for door number 3. He's still saying, say something nice. But in the case, like, maybe the bride really just wants to hear that she's beautiful. Doesn't every bride want to hear that? And Beit Hillel says, just tell her she's beautiful. Tell her she's beautiful. And then Shammai comes back with the Torah verse. And the game should be over. He just boom. He just leveled them. But instead, the rabbis say, no, Hillel wins. Hillel shouldn't win the argument, but he does. The rabbis ignore the Torah. But the rabbis ignore the Torah because of their desire to do what's not right in order to do what's right. I love this sugya. All right, there's been a lot of comments. Joette's been very, very patiently. I'll repeat what you said. So good. So Joette says, Beit Hillel, you missed a play, right? Like you could have come up with a counter biblical zinger, right? Shammai levels you with the don't lie from Exodus. Well, you could say, oh, really? God lies with Abraham and Sarah when Sarah says when Sarah says Abraham is too old to have a kid. Abraham's not able to, you know? And then God says, oh, yeah, both of you are old. God changes Sarah's words to spare Abraham his feelings. And so Joette says, hey, why, like, there is biblical precedence, and maybe that's why the rabbis are able to ignore the Torah. But what's interesting is Beit Hillel doesn't offer it. Beit Hillel doesn't deliver the zinger. The text that we're going to study that I printed out for you does. The text that I'm going to show you uses that actual example, Joette, because there's another text that clearly states that you can lie and comes up with two or three examples of where lying is okay. But what I find interesting about this text that I just read with you, that I didn't give you, is Beit Hillel's whole stance is just on like what's in the kishkas, what's in the soul, and it still wins. You can make the argument that Beit Hillel doesn't execute Talmudic reasoning very well at all, and he still wins. Because I think the rabbis want to move away from what's, I think the rabbis want to depart. And I love that there is the zinger available. He doesn't deliver the zinger, and yet he still gets the decision. It's sort of like, an analogy. I don't know if this works, but like, if it's the bottom of the ninth and your team is down by, is losing, and you almost hit a grand slam, but the ball goes foul, it's a foul ball. Well, all right, so like you didn't hit a grand slam, and here Beit Hillel didn't deliver the argument. Like he didn't deliver the source. The source is there. There's a bunch of them, but he didn't deliver it. Why should he get the decision? Why does he win? Unless maybe, and I don't know, I'm thinking about this, maybe the Talmud's trying to make a point. Like maybe, that, because they're aware of other, like why didn't Beit Hillel deliver it? Or it's unclear to me, and I think there's something out there about this. Okay, so other people, who else? Go ahead. Right. Right. I say this with our staff all the time. I'm like, 98% of disagreements are inadvertent. Right? Never assume when you get that email that makes you furious that the person intended. Don't read emotion into email. Most of the time, people aren't trying to hurt people's feelings, right? Sometimes they hurt your feelings, but most of the time it's unintentional. Feathers get ruffled, and it doesn't mean that it's not hurtful. It just means I don't like intent. And so, right. So Hillel is saying, standing before a bride, most people are not trying to be hurtful, and therefore he wants to live in the real world. And in the real world, most brides want to hear that they look beautiful, right? Most brides don't want to hear about their nail polish. They don't want to hear that the hem on their dress is great, or that the DJ is good, or the baby lamb chops are tasty. They want to hear that they look beautiful. And so right. Well, it's actually interesting. I wonder if there's a socioeconomic thing at play here. So Louis Ginsburg wrote this great essay. He's a Talmudic scholar. He wrote this great essay that looking at the disagreements between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. He doesn't use this one, but that a lot of them can be explained away by economic differences. So Beit Shammai is from the aristocratic class, and Beit Hillel is from the poor class. So Beit Hillel is a laborer, laborers, and Hillel is a laborer, and Shammai is an aristocrat, and then all their followers kind of follow along that lines. I'm wondering also, like for Beit Shammai, who says "tell it like it is," that in most of the weddings he was at, there was baby lamb chops, or there was something great. But I wonder with the weddings that Hillel went to, Beit Hillel, if they were very much more modest affairs, and like the only thing really to compliment is the bride. And so, are you going to say it or aren't you going to say it? Yes. Is there a comment? Ooh, okay. The comment is from Alexandra. She says, this also speaks to the concept of absolute truth of the words of the Bible or the Constitution or other such documents. Perhaps what is right is mutable within the context of given situations, kindness to others, or perhaps over centuries. Absolutely. Like thank you. The absolute truth. Oh, look, there I am. I'm watching. I did not look beautiful. Actually, I just looked. I was like, "Who's that guy who's losing his hair?" These are so white. All right, some other comments, and then Alexandra, to your point, this next text introduces the sort of that, like the idea of absolute truth. Right, that's what Alexandra's saying. For sure, Hillel's saying that. Like, Hillel's not saying, yes. The question is there another category of white lies? For sure, that's what Hillel is introducing. Hillel's not introducing a lie, and that is actually where our next story comes from. That Hillel is not saying lie to be duplicitous or create create acrimony. Hillel is lying for the sake of kindness, so a white lie, right? A clean it up kind of lie. Okay, so look at this. Anyone else had a comment before I can go on? Right. Right. Yeah. Look, these situations are tough. Interpersonally, they are tough. Like when do you say something to someone that is the truth? That when when is the truth helpful or hurtful? And it's tough when and it comes at you quickly because you often find yourself in the situation and you didn't even right, you don't even expect it. So there are people who are able to do sometimes the Shammai thing, door number 3, gets awkward because you can't. Sometimes like maybe I'm just not smart enough. Like I can't come up with something quick enough, right? Like I don't remember the baby lamb. I'm just standing there, and I don't remember the baby lamb chops. I have no idea about dresses, and and I'm just like, so I just go Beit Hillel real quick. I'm like, beautiful. I don't know. So here's a really interesting, yes. Right, because it's like that Seinfeld, like, no offense to any all babies are kind of ugly. All babies, like the newborns are like, they come out, they're all like, yeah, they're all like, a little like, they need to get hydrated, right? Like they're all, but it's like that Seinfeld when they see the ugly baby, right? And they're like, right. So whenever you get a picture, so according to Hillel, you say, what a beautiful baby. According to Shammai, you say, now that's a baby. If you think all babies are not great looking. And then no, wait, that's Shammai. But then according to Hillel, you say that's a beautiful baby. It's hard to say that. Sometimes. I don't know. Okay, last question. I'll repeat that. No, right. So the comment that was made was that in response to a lecture, someone's friend would say, now that was a talk. And they can interpret that however they wanted. And so that's a Shammai comment. That's door number 3. Nothing. Now, Hillel would say, that was very insightful, like a beautiful presentation. Okay. By the way, if any of you, on the high holidays with my sermons, Hillel. Go Hillel. Now, Rabbi, Marty Lasker really blew the shofar very well. No, but I'm saying that's number 3, right? Or, I want Hillel. I want you to say, Rabbi, that was a sermon. Right. And if you say that was a sermon, that could be door number 3. That was a sermon. It put me to sleep like all the other ones do. All right. That was a sermon. All right. I want to get to this other text. Go ahead. There was a Harry Belafonte moment in his song, which was Never Make a Pretty Woman Your Wife. Something tells me that song got canceled by the culture. Like our kids don't. If you have grown grandkids, you may want to. That's okay, Jim. Yeah. Right. And then so identifying when a white lie is actually helpful. So I think we would all agree that there's a difference between the bride. There's a difference between saying to the bride, a year before the wedding, you may want to get a different haircut, and say, as opposed to the day of the wedding, saying that. So the question is, when is 6 months before? I've been watching the old Seinfelds to fall asleep when I have insomnia. So there was one where the physical therapist has an out-of-date hairstyle, and so everyone wants to say it to her, but everyone's afraid of saying it to her. But in the end, they say it to her. But anyway. But the question is, you wouldn't say that on the wedding date, your hair looks awful, but, 6 months before, so, you may want to get a different hairdresser or something like that could be helpful. So when is it, everyone would agree, standing before the bride on her wedding day constructive criticism is not so constructive. And so that's the question. My wife and I have this thing speaking about sermons. Like, whenever one of us has a presentation or something to submit, our joke is, when is Kol Nidre in the next hour? In other words, like, if I'm going to show my wife a draft of a sermon, it's an hour before Kol Nidre, she should just say, "What a sermon." Or that's door number 3, or Hillel, it's great. But if it's a week beforehand and she thinks it's awful, it's actually better to say, please help, you need a little help here. All right, let's look at this. So this is a piece from Sanhedrin. Let me open the Gemara here. So the Torah was talking about cases where truthfulness would be absent, and then the Gemara digresses to talk about people who only speak truth. So Lana, everyone like your husband, okay? Undiagnosed, okay. So on page 1 in that first box, it's from Sanhedrin 97a. Rava's commenting and says, initially I would say there is no truth anywhere in the world. There was a certain one of the sages, and Rav Tavut is his name, and some say Rav Taviyomi is his name, who was so honest that if they were to give him the entire world, he would not deviate from the truth in his statement. He said to me, one time I happened to come to a certain place, and Truth is its name. So the name of the town is Truth. And its residents would not deviate from the truth in their statements. And no person from there would die prematurely, meaning, like, the rabbinic idea is you get zingers, like you get days off of your life, for lies. So everyone lived to their full allotment because they didn't tell lies. I married a woman from them, and I had 2 sons from her. Oh, wait a second. Oh boy, this did not work out. Hold on. Sorry, I didn't check let me go to the source here. All right, here we go. So I had 2 sons from her. I messed up on the sheet and I didn't look. One day, his wife was sitting and washing her hair. So there's a parenthetical note that in rabbinic literature, uncovered hair is a source of sexuality. And so therefore, that's where married women are supposed to cover their hair. Okay? So she is washing her hair, which can also be implied, especially in those days, that you were probably not clothed at all when washing your hair, or you were at some degree unclothed, which is still the case, right? That most people are without clothes. I mean, I guess some people wash their hair in the sink in the hairdressers, or maybe at home, but most of the time you're naked so her hair is uncovered and she's, okay. Her neighbor came and knocked on the door. Thinking it would not be proper to tell the neighbor that his wife was washing her hair, he said to the neighbor, "She is not here." Subsequently, his 2 sons died. The people of that town came to him and asked, "What is the reason for this?" He told them what had happened. They said to him, "We beg you, leave our town and do not incite death against these people." Any reactions? It's a tough... Right, right. Then his notion of truth was dispelled. Right, exactly. That he realized that he couldn't. Right. hmm What do you think is the message of this? Don't wash your hair. Oh, we have only a few minutes. Um, it's a complicated story. First of all, it's clearly a fable because the town is called Truth. The rabbi's name is Rabbi Good. Like when you look at it, his name is Tav Yomi, which is like good day, or Tavut, which means like good. So it's like good rabbi, and or his name was Good Day Rabbi, and he lived in the town called Truth. So it's clearly a fable here. Any thoughts about this sugya before we? It's a complicated story. I should have spent more. Yeah. Why do you think he didn't tell the truth? What was the conflict? Right, like her modesty. So her modesty over truth. Those are the two value conflicts. Right. So then the question is, wait a second, is it really sacrificing her modesty by just, is it embarrassing her by saying, like, everyone gets naked, but we're a lot more comfortable with it than they were. So he chooses one way. He chooses the lie as opposed to the truth, thinking that he's saving her, her dignity. But what's interesting is then it actually sacrifices her sons. Yeah, they died because he lied. But then it's interesting, but then the text says his sons died. Maybe they wanted to spare her it's interesting. They don't say their sons died or her sons died. They say his sons died. But she was the mom. So it seems like there's a divine punishment for the sin of lying. Right. I can imagine going back to aforementioned 14-year-old, like someone coming and if I said to his friends, "Oh, he's in the bathroom," he'd be mortified, furious at me. So, I mean, maybe the lesson of this story is that like such places can't really exist with real people. Right? That real people have real conflict. They're trying their best to do the best they can. This rabbi is like, he's not like trying to, it's a white lie. This is the definition of a white lie. Like, he doesn't want to embarrass his wife. But he doesn't. He doesn't. So he chooses the white lie, and it's under the best of circumstances. He's just trying to, spare her dignity. And yet, then his family gets zapped, essentially. And her family, too. So maybe one of the lessons here is in such situations, there is no town called Truth. Because that's not real. Like, these things don't really happen. We live in a world where in reality, you're put in weird, like bad. There's those tense situations. Okay, I wanted to bring another text, which is here. This is. Here. I'm just going to read this through, and you'll come and you'll process this because this has the text that Joette has the proof text that Joette referenced with Abraham. So I'm just going to read this through. Rabbi Ilya said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon. So this is Shimon Bar Yochai's son, Rabbi Elazar. We've met him before. It is permitted for a person to depart from the truth in a matter that will bring peace. As it is stated, your father commanded before he died, saying, so shall you say to Joseph, please pardon your brother's crime. In other words, in this situation, does anyone know this situation? What's the situation? What's going on? Oh, this is after. Yeah, they sold Joseph. Okay, I'm not going to quiz you. No, okay, so this is after. So I want to play. So this is everyone's back together. The brothers are all there. Jacob's about to die. So what do the brothers do? The brothers look at each other and say, maybe Joseph just forgave us to spare good old Dad. He didn't want to hurt Dad anymore. So he forgave us then, but once Dad is dead, he's going to get us. So what they do is they concoct this plan where they say to Joseph, Dad told us that you have to forgive us. That was his dying wish. And that's in the Torah. And so the question here is that's one proof text of a lie for the sake of peace. The brothers were worried that if they created a lie to assure their safety. And according to Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, that's okay. The second text, Rabbi Natan says it's a mitzvah to depart from the truth in order to preserve peace. He actually adds a little bit. Not that it's okay, but it's a mitzvah. It's an obligation. Is that how it? Yeah. Rabbi Natan, that's interesting. Rabbi Natan says, no. It's not only there's a difference. A mitzvah here is not a good deed. It's an obligation. So Rabbi Natan says, Rabbi Elazar, not only is it permitted to say a lie, a white lie, for the sake of peace, it's an obligation to create a white lie for the sake of peace. And where does he learn that out? And Shmuel said, how can I go and Saul will hear and kill me? It's from the book of 1 Samuel. Let me give you the context. Saul's on his way out as king. Samuel is sent out to go identify who's going to be the next king. What do you think Saul's going to do to the person who's identified to be the next king before he is exactly, Gary, off with the head? So, what does God say to to Samuel, who's the one who has to go out and reconnoiter and find the next king? Tell Saul that you're going to do a sacrifice. You're on this trip not to find a new king. It's you're going there to pray, to daven, to offer sacrifices. And that's what God suggests to Samuel, the prophet, to tell Saul. So in other words, God lies and tells him to lie. God tells the prophet to lie in order to assure that the prophet is not killed by an anguished Saul. Okay, now verse 3, example 3, and this is Joette's example. It was taught in the school of Rabbi Yishmael, great is peace, as even the Holy One, blessed be he, departed from the truth for it. As initially it is written that Sarah said of Abraham, and my Lord is old. And in the end it was written that God told Abraham that Sarah said, and I am old. In other words, God adjusted Sarah's words in order to spare Abraham's hurt feelings that might lead Abraham and Sarah to quarrel. When God first announced that there was going to be a baby, Sarah says, how's that going to happen when I'm married to that old guy? But when God recounts it to Abraham, God says, Sarah laughed at this whole notion because she said she was too old. So God lies, this is the point that Joette made, in order to create peace. So it seems, at least from the force of rabbinic literature, and this is what I'll conclude with, that if it's a white lie, meaning, and I'm going to define white lie, I've never looked up the term before, but it's a lie that's for a good, a kind lie in order to make it right, to pave the street of goodness, then it is, in rabbinic literature, seems to be allowed. That they are the rabbis, at least, even though Beit Shammai comes in with a proof text from the Torah, it seems that the predominant theory here is that door number 2 is okay. No, not door number 3. Because door number 3 is not lying. It's saying something that is true, but not exactly addressing the situation. Right? Door number 3 is you were wearing a beautiful dress, or the flowers are lovely, or you have a your smile is wide, or you have all your teeth. You know? Right. So that is door number 3. Door number 1 is ignore the situation. But door number 2, the rabbis seem to find that a departure from the truth, a white lie, is okay for the sake of the integrity of someone's feelings or for the sake of assuring peace. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Now someone's going to say, now that's a class. Okay. Thank you. Right. Yeah. Right.
So if you're going up to
The bride. And
Kol Nidre and your fly's wearing your shoes very tight, we tell you.
right.
But if there's a big rip on the back of your pants, we don't tell
That's exact, and that seems to be right. Like if you can make it, if the only thing, if the information will only be destructive, then right.
you. You find it when you get home that you're out there with
Right.